for no one. No one but me.
We dance to the drums of war, and all our hearts beat as one.
The Guardians of the Ancient expansion has provided us with a very much needed shake-up of the meta, with 3 fantastic new champions and a lot of new playstyles. From this list of decks you'll see several new decks created by the latest expansion, as well as a few old decks from past metas. I know loads of you were asking where this video was, so I'm glad to finally bring it to you. This is Top 10 Decks Patch 2.7. The data presented here is analysed by BomberTV using MOBA Analytics. He's a Masters tier player with a background in game theory and game design. He took the most winning archetypes into Master tier, excluding ones with small play rates, analysed their key properties on why they are so strong. Link to his channel is in a pinned comment and in the card above. Please remember to like and subscribe and turn on the bell notifications too. So let's dive in. This is Lissandra Trundle and it features cards primarily from the Freljord region, but with lots of support from the Shadow Isles too. It's a typical control deck with lots of high costing cards, 8 cards costing 7+ mana in total. It's a fairly expensive deck featuring 5 epic cards, and it's actually quite a spell heavy one too with 22 spells. The idea of this deck is to win with a Watcher generated from Lissandra after she levels up. To do that we obviously need to level up Lissandra, and obviously she levels up when you've summoned 2+ allies that cost 8+. So when she does level up, she summons a Watcher in the hand. Nice and simple. Trundle is therefore her best friend, as he generates an 8+ mana unit, which is essentially free, and it repays itself immediately, so it's obviously his big ice pillar. And this gives you a free activation towards the level up of Lissandra. Another way of leveling up is Spectral Matron, so which is probably being seen for the first time ever in a competitive sense. And the reason why she's so good is not only she's an 8+ cost card herself, but she can also summon a unit that costs 8 mana as well with her effect, who creates an ephemeral version of an ally in the hand to summon it. This will immediately level up Lissandra, keeping the 8+ cost unit in the hand, so you can obviously play it later on the next turn, which will basically give you so easily the 4+, 8+ mana costing cards that the Watcher needs to basically make it a free unit. So obviously it's got a high mana cost. If you do this, it gets to 0. So this is basically the combo, and after you cheat out a Watcher with Spectral Matron, which will discount the Watcher in the hand to 0 costing mana as well, you can basically have 2 Watchers in play, nuking your opponent's enemy's deck twice, and attacking with 20+ damage. Your opponent is going to be dead, I have no kind of doubt about that. With that said, you should be able to survive to late game to do this on the 8th turn that you obviously need to be aiming for, but it is the trickiest part of this deck. But luckily these are the 2 best regions for control, so you've got AoEs such as Avalanche, healing cards like Withering Wail, and removals like Vengeance. So overall this is a very interesting deck. It's pretty bland in early game, but late game you're going to be having a lot of fun. In my previous videos, a lot of you were asking why had I not covered this earlier, and the answer for that is simply that top tier players are having a lot of success with this deck, but it seems a lot harder for the kind of amateur players, your beginner level players. They're trying it out and it's just dropping the win rate down as they're not fully understanding how the deck works. For that reason, it's why we're seeing the stats for this deck outside of our top 10 decks. Obviously that's a previous video we did on this channel, but if you understand it, hopefully this video helps, then you're going to have a lot more success. So please check out BomberTV's if you want even more detail on how this video works, and you should see that in the card in the top right above. Mid-range Frostbite saw a bit of a resurgence, maybe because of the lack of proper control decks except for Lissandra Control, which, let's say most of the time, is probably going to be a fair matchup. The fact it gives us space for more mid-range decks, and Frostbite mid-range has kind of always been the best mid-range deck of them, so that is naturally why this one's popped up. As you may have seen at the start of this section, the Shurima expansion variation of this deck features LeBlanc and Whispered Words, so this is the new variation of this archetype, so I'll be interested to see how long this stays around for. This is Azir Lucian, and it features cards from Demacia and Shurima. I've classed this deck as a mid-range, even though it's quite aggressive and also has some combo potential. The average cost in the deck is more weighted towards low cost, with 16 cards costing 2 mana and 9 cards costing 1 mana. It's fairly budget with only 2 epic cards. This deck has a lot of things going on. The main idea is to take advantage of the when allies attack effect on both Azir and Emperor's Dais to summon lots of sand soldiers and overwhelm your opponent with basically quite wide boards. As you can see on the screen, both cards have the effect to summon sand soldiers, so you can quickly sense the theme here. To achieve this pretty straightforward synergy, you can do it with scouts such as Grizzled Ranger. As a reminder for all new players, all your scout units can attack twice as long as your first attack is exclusively with scout only cards. Another attack-minded card is obviously Lucian, which has the Irelia effect that when a unit dies for the first time each round, rally means you gain an attack counter once again, and obviously has this on his leveled up card. Lucian will almost always level up as you're going to summon lots of ephemeral sand soldiers, which almost always guarantee an additional attack thanks to Lucian. Ephemeral means a unit dies at the end of the round on its first strike, so a very nice little combo here. Another card which is very strong here is Inspiring Marshal, which can have a win condition on his own. He basically doubles the damage dealt by every sand soldier, which can you imagine is pretty strong considering how many you're going to summon depending on how many times you attack. So overall this is a very aggressive deck with some nice combo potentials, meant for competitive players which basically like skill based decks. This is Discard Aggro and it features cards from Noxus and Piltover and Zorn. And it's quite a unique deck in the sense it features 3 champions, but the main variation you'll see of this deck definitely includes Draven and Jinx, and these are obviously the 2 cards that are linked to the discard mechanic in one way or another. And it's a very typical aggro deck with lots of low costing cards. The deck plan is quite simple. Against slow decks, try to finish your opponent as early as possible before they get their endgame. Against aggro or mid-range decks, you can try and win the race against them to see who can finish faster, or you can go for the value approach granted by the leveled up Jinx. Of course, you need to first draw her and then level her up. As the name suggests, the deck is all around discarding, so cards which can be both discard and draw are very desirable, such as Zornite Urchin and Rummage. The deck has a lot of options, smart plays, and therefore is a very skill based deck. First of all, it's always important to know when to discard a card and what ones you should be discarding altogether. For example, there are obvious discard targets such as Flame Chompers, Jury Rig and Vision, and these are pretty straightforward what to discard. As for the when to discard a card, Jury Rig can be useful to summon a blocker or attack at burst speed, either punishing their open attack or to go in for the kill. The same goes for discarding Flame Chompers at burst speed, although it is much more useful to remove a big blocker so that your other units can basically go in and do what they need to do. Vision should be used to go in for the kill and take your opponent off guard, or to complete trades. This can almost be a win condition in some situations. With the new addition of survival skills, Discard Aggro seems to be getting a lot of love from Riot at the moment, and continues to be one of the best spots in the meta. Even if this list doesn't run survival skills, I would still suggest experimenting with it. Discard Aggro has been a staple in the meta for almost a year now, and it feels like we really need to tone down Draven in the same way they did with Fiora. This alongside a minor nerf to maybe a few of the discard themed cards should finally get rid of this deck, because let's face it, we're bored of seeing it. Here is another deck you'll definitely recognise. It's Pirate Aggro, featuring cards from Noxus and Bilgewater. It's an aggro deck with a very mixed mana cost, with several cards costing all the different mana costs from 1 to 5. It's quite an expensive deck to build with 8 epic cards in total. The power cards here are Misfortune and Gangplank. Even if Misfortune will struggle to level up, she's here just a consistent way basically to level up Gangplank and make your board much more threatening on your attacking turns. Gangplank can then end the game against wide boards, and therefore making aggro mirror matches quite easy with this deck. This deck wants to develop a board early on, and you can do this with a very quick start to the game with burn cards such as Lieben Saboteur and Jagged Butcher. Afterwards, it has a lot of ways to end the game with burn with units like Imperial Demolitionist or Jack the Winner. Jack the Winner creates a Sleep with the Fishes each round, which deals 2 to an ally to deal 2 to the opposing Nexus. You also have Zap Spray Fin, which will be able to draw you a Noxus for 4, always, as this is your only spell card with 3 or less mana, and this is obviously a fantastic card in this deck which can be very aggressive. If you reach late game, you can quickly close the game with Captain Farron and Decimate. Using the overwhelming Captain Farron and the pure blood damage from Decimate will quickly reduce your opposing Nexus to 0. So overall this is a pretty solid deck and a very fast one too, so if you want to rank up quickly, this is definitely an option I recommend. Pirate Aggro receives a nerf to Captain Farron, but some deck lists of this Pirate Aggro archetype don't even include him. So even if they do, you're going to have such a strong aggressive opener with 2 Decimates that's probably going to be more than enough for this deck, so I'd say it's basically unchanged. Pirate Aggro is obviously an aggro aggressive deck, and when it's so early in an expansion, aggro decks like this one are always going to perform quite well, preying down on players experimenting with new unrefined strategies, so that's why loads of aggro decks are on this list. This version of Burn Aggro is a new quotation marks deck from the latest expansion, and is a variation of the archetype that was popular several months ago. The new cards just made it that little bit stronger, and we're yet to have a meta where Burn is dominating. It features cards from Noxus and Piltover and zilean like before, and has Draven and Teemo in the deck. It's extremely cheap with 29 commons and no epics. This archetype is probably the simplest concept ever. To win the game you must reduce the health of your opponent's Nexus from 20 to 0 as quickly as possible, and this deck does exactly that, and it does it fast as well. Start your game very aggressively. It's crucial to have a nice curve with particular care for 1-drops, even if it means you are more attacking. You should take every opportunity to deal cheap damage to your opponent's Nexus, so attack with cards with attack effects which burn, even if these cards die in the process. So I'm talking about Legion Saboteur and Boom Crew Rookie here right at the beginning, which can help start your basically very aggressive start to the game. In a mirror game, or against a board-centric decks, try to use Used Car Salesman on the defensive turn. Summoning 3 units basically mean you're blocking their whole attack, giving you more time to burn them out later on. Don't keep your burn spells in your mulligan, as you will naturally draw into them, and use them to close the game as fast as possible. So this applies to all your burn spells, including your cheapest ones like Mystic Shot, right up to Decimate. This deck includes Ballistic Bot and Aftershock from the latest expansion. Ballistic Bot generates an ignition every round which deals 1 damage to the opposing Nexus, and Aftershock deals 3 to anything or destroys a landmark. In this deck, use Aftershock to damage the opponent's Nexus. This deck first appeared in patch 2.16, so absolutely ages ago, and it's probably a deck that is in the meta simply because it requires less skill to be played than the Spider Aggro deck. And the kind of simplicity often leads to a faster game. It also makes it more friendly with beginners. It's a fairly budget deck, and this is probably why it's being used before players advance to Spider Aggro when they want something a little bit more complicated. This is Spider Aggro and features a nice 50-50 mix of Noxus and Shadow Isles. The deck is very follower heavy, featuring 28 followers in total and only 9 spells. If you look at the mana cost split in the bottom left, you will see that a mad amount of cards cost 3 or less mana. The only cards costing 3 or more is the 3 copies of Decimate that cost 5 mana. It's a very budget deck with 0 epics and 27 commons, making it great for beginners too. This deck is the essence of aggro. You want to deal as much damage as possible with the first 2 attacks of the game, as essentially your curve ends at 3 mana. This means against control decks, you want to develop as much as possible without risking too much from that AoE, even though sometimes you've got to take the risk. But if they have a board clear, then good luck, but all decks have a counter. Legion Rearguard with 3 damage and Precious Pet with 2 damage, and a Fearsome, meaning that very few early game cards can actually block it, can help your very aggressive turns on 1 and 2, so you're going to be doing a lot of damage here. You can deal an insane amount of damage very early. For example, on turn 1 you can summon a Legion Saboteur for 3 damage. Turn 2 you summon a House Spider, who in turn summons a Spiderling 2 for an additional damage. And turn 3 you summon a Frenzied Skitterer for 11 damage in total, setting your opponent at 6 health, by turn 3, so your games could be incredibly short if everything goes in favour here. Later on, you can easily burn your opponents from low amounts of health with burn spells like Decimate, and burn units like Doom Beast. Decimate simply deals 4 damage to your opponent's Nexus, and Doom Beast drains 2 from your opponent's Nexus when summoned with Nightfall. So it's not only burns your opponent, but can also help keep your Nexus healthy, because obviously you're going to be playing very aggressively, you need to survive as well. Stalking Shadow is a particularly strong card for the burn purposes, as effectively you can double your burn potential from units like Doom Beast, or simply copy cheap units to go very wide very effectively. For example, copy a Zilean Onlooker, who gains 2 damage and Fearsome on Nightfall, so this is a great unit for quick, easy 4 damage. Azir Draven is a deck featuring cards from Piltover and Zorn and Noxus. It features a very balanced mix of spells and followers and has a very low average mana cost, with all but 2 copies of Captain Farron costing 4 or less mana. It's relatively expensive, featuring 5 epic cards. The core idea of this deck is to get your Captain Farron out as fast as possible and finish the game with him. To accomplish this goal, you need to do 3 things: draw him, survive, and deal a little bit of damage before he comes onto the board. To accomplish the draw part, we have the so-called discard package. Discard to draw cards like Sump Dredger and Rummage are fantastic draw tools, which unfortunately would not really increase your hand size, but basically quickly cycle through your deck faster to get the cards you need. That's where Draven, Chump Wump and Ballistic Bot come in. By generating cards which are not as very useful, you can use them as basically easy discard targets and replace them with more valuable cards. To survive, you have lots and lots of control tools, like Mystic Shot and Fumigenic Beam. Use these to take out your opponent's key cards. On top of that, all the units from the discard package are pretty good blockers too. Ezreal can be involved in your game plan, which also helps on the control side, giving you additional Mystic Shots. Finish off by summoning Captain Farron and using his Overwhelm and the Decimates he generates to quickly finish off your opponent. Captain Farron that appears in this deck got nerfed, and this deck is much more noticeable than all the others that he was basically running. So this deck is still super consistent though, which is why it's still pretty high on this list, but not the number 1 spot. Captain Farron. Azir Draven continues to be very solid, even though it's decreasing in viability, especially after that much deserved nerf to Captain Farron. This is Thresh Nasus, features cards mostly from the Shadow Isles, with a large number of cards also appearing from the Shurima region. It's a bit of a control aggro hybrid, if that even makes sense. It has a lot of low costing cards, but the win condition's more control focused. It's a medium budget deck with 3 epic cards needed. The idea behind this deck is to play aggressively in the early game, often winning just from pure aggro, and you also have lots of low cost followers to help with this, and they can deal big damage quick, so think Backeye Reaper or Ravenous Butcher for example. Alternatively, you can try and finish the game much later with a high powered Nasus and Atrocity. So Nasus gains 1/1 every time you slay a unit, giving him lots of potential power, and Atrocity deals damage to anything really, including opponent's Nexus, equal to a unit that you sacrificed power, and this can be a win condition in a lot of occasions. The deck essentially plays out like the They Who Endure deck, so those who are familiar with that deck, it's a very easy kind of playstyle here. You're just kind of replacing They Who Endure with a big Nasus. Since Nasus is our win condition, we want to cheat him out and get him as fast as possible on the field, and that's where Thresh comes into play, helping us get Nasus onto the board quickly with his leveled up effect, which summons an attacking champion from your deck the first time a leveled up Thresh attacks. To help Nasus get lots of power, so many cards in this deck involve killing your own units to contribute to the slay tally, so this includes units like Blighted Caretaker and spells like Rite of the Calling, which both involve killing one of your own units. You also have lots of ways to draw, both for refueling fuel, which an aggro deck needs because they're going to be using lots of cards quickly that die, as well as getting your combo out faster. So these drawing cards include cards like Spirit Leech or Glimpse Beyond, which also have effects that involve killing your own units, so once again supporting that slay token as well as helping kind of fuel the aggro engine. This is Noxus Shurima Aggro and features cards from both Noxus and Shurima. It's very aggressive with a huge 30 cards costing 3 or less mana. The champions in this deck are Azir, Draven and Darius, and it's very budget with 24 commons and only 1 epic card needed. This deck is just straight up aggro. We're running the best of the best aggressive units. So ideally you want to start the game with Legion Saboteur or the new Dune Keeper. Legion Saboteur has 2 damage and deals 1 to enemy nexus on attack, and Dune Keeper also has 2 damage on himself and summons a Sand Soldier on summon, and this could provide up to another 2 damage. Then follow up with Legion Grenadier, or double up on 1-drops. So Grenadier obviously has 3 damage and deals 1 on death to the opponent. So the trend must be quite apparent here. You're basically really just trying to chip away damage at your opponent's nexus. Getting Azir is crucial on turn 3, as it can put so much pressure on your opponent. Azir can keep obviously summoning Sand Soldiers, who deal 1 damage to the enemy's nexus on attack, so just really good continued burn here. Shurima now shines bright with one of the best burn spells in the game, Ruinous Path. This obviously draws 1, and if you've slain a unit this round, drains 2 from the enemy nexus, so once again some fantastic value here to keep chipping away at the opposing nexus. Later on you have lots of burn cards, so think Decimate or Nox for 4. Decimate deals 4 to the opposing nexus, and Nox for 4 deals 3 to an ally to deal 3 to anything. You can target the opponent's nexus with this too, so overall it really kind of contributes to a really aggressive deck, and even though it feels quite repetitive, you're going to be climbing the ranks quickly with this one. This is Irelia Azir and features cards mostly from Iona with a good amount of Shurima cards too. It's a fairly standard mix of followers and spells. Like many aggro decks, most of the cards have a low mana cost, with a huge number of cards costing 1 or 2 mana. It's actually fairly budget to build as well, with not a single epic card needed. This deck is super aggressive. The main idea is to summon lots of units, go wide, meaning lots of units on the board basically, and attack as many times as possible. Azir and Empress Diaz have the effect to summon a Sand Soldier on attack, so if you have both cards on the field, you're going to get 2 Sand Soldiers with every attack you do. Absolutely insane value. There's been a new keyword added to the game, Blade Stance. Blade Stance starts a free attack with that many summoned blades, and in separate attack phase, a bit like Scouts. Lots of units cards revolve around this mechanic, including Ribbon Dancer and Blossoming Blade in this deck. The Sand Soldiers from Azir and Empress Diaz effect will also be summoned on these Blade Dance attacks, meaning you're going to get a very wide board with lots of pressure. Cards like Sparring Student and Green Grey Duo both have effects that gain power when other units are summoned, meaning you can quickly build them up into threats each round with obviously all the blades that are being summoned, all the Sand Soldiers, and meaning you can have a really wide board with big power units too. Combining all the Blade Dance combos with all the Sand Soldier attacks means you can have pretty explosive attacks starting from as early as turn 3, often leveling up Azir or Irelia by turn 4. This means you can access their leveled up effects super quick and close the game nice and early. Another win condition is via Aspiring Marshal, which basically triples the threat of blades and Sand Soldiers. So Inspiring Marshal has the effect of granting 2 damage to summoned allies the turn you play it. This means a blade and Sand Soldier has an extra 2 damage just off the back like that, and you're going to be summoning a lot of these, so this is going to quickly add up. The deck is very fun to play and feels like an aggro combo deck, which is a really rare combo. Please check out BomberTV's linked video in the card above for a great analysis of this deck and to see how it's played by a true Master tier player. And there we go guys, it's fantastic to see a new deck at number 1 with so many Shurima decks also appearing on this list. Interestingly, this is the first time Nasus Thresh has appeared on this list. It was really present in the pre-expansion meta, but the win rate has only been made into the top 10 via this expansion, so it's got better and better as time's gone on. I personally love using Azir Irelia, but I have to say it seems a little bit broken right now, and I feel it's going to be nerfed quite soon. Who is your new favourite champion? I would love to hear in the comments. Up next is Best Meta Decks Patch 2.7, taking a look at the decks dominating this meta. The data presented here is analysed by BomberTV using MOBA Analytics. He's a Masters tier player with a background in game theory and game design. He took the most winning archetypes into Master tier, excluding ones with small play rates, analysed their key properties on why they are so strong. Link to his channel is in a pinned comment and in the card above. I've recently set up an Instagram account, @LoreGuides, and I'll be doing a giveaway shortly. please follow this account for see posts about new videos and will be in a chance of winning this giveaway. Please remember to like and subscribe and turn on bell notifications too. See you next time, guys.